Practical SQL Server 2012 Administration and Programming, Select Statement, Dynamic SQL Query Building and Execution. Dynamic SQL extends the static SQL language, makes it significantly more capable for building powerful and robust applications. Something we cannot do in static SQL, we may be able to do it in dynamic SQL. There are two statements to execute dynamic SQLs. One is sp_execute SQL. This is the preferred way. And the other is the execute statement. This is more sophisticated. It provides better functionality and protection as well. We have to be careful because SQL injection attack may happen in dynamic SQL, and here is an article which explains how to protect. Let's start our investigation of dynamic SQL with a very simple application. Assume that we store formulas in a table, and this is a table variable at math. Then we can dynamically execute this formula by selecting it from the @math table variable and submitting it to sp_execute SQL. So let's see how that works. So this is the content of the table, in this case a table variable, and this is the actual result of the execution of the dynamic SQL. For debugging purposes, it is a good idea to put a print statement prior to execution and check out what is the print statement. So when we start testing, we test it like this. And here is the result of a print statement. Select, and this looks like an OK statement for execution. So what we can do now is uncomment the exec statement and comment out the print statement, because we are satisfied when we can execute it. We are selecting ID2, and this is ID2, the second row, and this is the arithmetic algebraic formula. So here are the parts for dynamic SQL. There is the dynamic SQL variable. This is where we are building our query. And then, once we finish building it, the query can be executed like this. Let's proceed. We are creating a stored procedure, a dynamic SQL stored procedure. Execute. If you think there are too many single quotes in building dynamic SQL, you are right, that is a problem. You can use char 39 also to make it more readable instead of a single quote. So we are execute the stored procedure. Execute, so this is the dynamic stored procedure, and last name pattern search. Well, what if we want to do some different last name? When we can do something like %sign and ti and execute. And if we look in the last name, we see the ti, so this is a wildcard search. We can do a similar search with a query. On the other hand, in this query, it's hardwired for a specific pattern. And in the case of dynamic stored procedure, it is a parameter. So here the pattern is anything ending with E, and all of these last names ending with E. The following dynamic stored procedure is select the first 3 columns of a table. This is the definition of a stored procedure. Let's compile it. And when we test it, and we have 3 tests, 3 different tables, and when we drop the dynamic stored procedure. Now in production we usually don't drop the stored procedure, but we are doing testing, so that's the reason it's being dropped. So the script can be run again. And this is the first 3 columns of a person.person table. And this is the employee table, first 3 columns, and this is the production.product table, first 3 columns. So the dynamic stored procedure works correctly. We cannot do this using static SQL. We have to use dynamic SQL. The reason we can do it because the select from table does not accept a variable. This is very important, although it's complicated, but it is a very good way of using dynamic SQL by using parameters. And the parameters can be input parameters, and it can also be output parameters. So let's execute this script. So this is where we call it, and this is the result. The last first name of last name starting with M. And when we go to messages, we see the actual query which has been executed. So it works with person.person table. Let's add an extra print here so we can see the separation between a SQL command and the parameter definition. So this is the SQL command we assembled in @SQL command, local variable, and this is the parameter definition we assembled for add first letter of last name and add first name out, add last first name out. This is a dynamic stored procedure in Northwind. And this is the calling sequence. We are looking for California, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington State companies. This is in pubs. and our dynamic stored procedure. Correction, this is a dynamic SQL script, it's not a stored procedure. And this is a dynamic script execution by using parameters. Dynamic SQL stored procedure. And we have an execution string and dropping at the end. The following is a very interesting and a very simple dynamic stored procedure. It's a general select. Let's see how it works. We are missing a go. So let's do it again. Execute. And first we are selecting from authors. Then adventure work human resources, department table, and then the titles table. As we see in the dynamic SQL string, the table name is variable. Dynamic SQL search, stored procedure. We should be in Northwind. Execute, and here is the result. We were looking for product ID 20, 21, and 22. Open query dynamic SQL, and this is how the dynamic SQL looks. To get some results, we have to add 4 years to the date, because the dates were shifted from SQL Server 2008. So we should be 7 actually. And 7. We are creating a new table parts usage in the dynamic SQL statement itself. And when we select from the table and we drop the table. Order by new ID function is a random sort. Dynamic pivot, there is a pivot function available in SQL Server 2012, but it is static. And if we have new data in the database, then we would have to change the program. So if we change the pivot to dynamic pivot, it automatically picks up the new columns as the data changes. So let's check out how it works. Execute. So this is pivoting the data. That means we take the data from the column format and from the rows level and make the data into columns. Other names for this matrix report or cross-tab report. Static we can do using static SQL. That's not a problem. But what happens if we get data for 2005? The static pivot statement is not going to pick it up because everything is hardwired. On the other hand, the dynamic SQL statement is going to pick it up because we dynamically prepare the column list. Here is the dynamic preparation of the column list. So it is purely based on data, and we are not hardwiring any year in it. We can really see the power of dynamic SQL in this example, where we can create dynamic reporting using dynamic SQL. We are talking about productivity. We are talking about production as well. We are not able to go back to a script and change it because we have a new month. That's a waste of time. So where comes to the help? Dynamic SQL. In the following example, the dynamic script will rebuild all indexes for all tables. So let's test it. Execute. So execution started. In this instance, we get the data from information schema tables, which is a database metadata tables, and we loop through all the tables. And this is the result display. Query execution successful. These are the queries which were executed, dynamically generated these queries. Of course, if I take a query and put it into a new query window, I should be able to execute it, and it executed correctly. If not, we would get error messages. Recapping, dynamic SQL is the extension of static SQL. With dynamic SQL, we are able to do truly robust database applications because practically sky is the limit with dynamic SQL. This is the end of the unit.